The sterile white noise of the Sensitive Compartmented Information Facility, SCF, did little to drown out the internal cacophony. On the secure monitors surrounding me, data streams flickered, intelligence reports from fusion centers, social media threat monitoring algorithms, diplomatic cable intercepts, raw feeds from Capitol complex surveillance cameras. My world, as lead special agent for the U.S. Capitol Police Threat Assessment Section, was a relentless torrent of information, each byte potentially signifying danger aimed at the heart of American democracy. We parsed cryptic online manifestos, analyzed suspicious packages, assessed the intentions of individuals fixated on specific members of Congress, planned security details for high-risk hearings, and constantly wargamed scenarios that felt increasingly plausible in the fractured political climate. The weight wasn't just abstract, it was physical. The Kevlar vest, worn during long shifts patrolling the echoing marble halls or overseeing security perimeters during tense joint sessions, felt like a permanent part of my anatomy. The hypervigilance required, scanning every face in a gallery, noting every out-of-place vehicle, analyzing body language for pre-attack indicators, became an exhausting default setting, difficult to switch off even when I was miles away from the Capitol dome. The ghosts of January 6th lingered, a constant, chilling reminder of the fragility of order and the virulence of politically motivated threats. We had thwarted countless plots since then, intercepted weapons, neutralized potential attackers, but the pressure never truly subsided. It was a siege mentality, lived daily. You scanned the entire playground for threats twice while Sophia was on the swings, Alex. Isabella had observed quietly one Saturday afternoon, her voice gentle but weary. You checked the parking lot exits 3 times before we even got out of the car at the grocery store. This job, it's consuming you. We need a perimeter of our own, somewhere the background noise isn't potential IED chatter. She was right. The job's intensity was bleeding into every corner of our lives, casting long shadows over the simple joys we wanted for our kids, Sophia and Mateo. We needed a deliberate, radical shift. We needed distance, not just miles on the odometer, but a fundamental change in environment. We needed a place where the loudest arguments were about leaf blowers, not legislative riders, where the most significant security concern was remembering to lock the car doors. Willow Creek Estates, nestled deep in the Northern Virginia suburbs, presented itself as the apotheosis of this desired normalcy. Glossy brochures showcased sprawling lawns, meticulously pruned crepe myrtles, a sparkling community pool complex, and colonial-style homes radiating an aura of undisturbed, upper-middle-class tranquility. It felt engineered for serenity, aggressively G-rated. The commute would still be long, but the promise was a life unplugged from the high-voltage current of D.C. politics. We bought the house on Azalea Court, a solid, 4-bedroom brick structure indistinguishable from its neighbors, hoping its very blandness would be a balm. We weren't just buying real estate. We were investing heavily in the possibility of boring, predictable, blessedly unfederal existence. Our formal integration into the regulated ecosystem of Willow Creek Estates began, predictably, with a violation notice. Less than 2 full days after the moving van departed, leaving behind only faint tire tracks on the asphalt, a crisp white envelope was found securely taped to our newly painted front door. Inside, a formally worded letter, printed on expensive-feeling ivory paper bearing the intricate Willow Creek Estates HOA logo, a weeping willow gracefully encircling what appeared to be a micrometer, informed us of a violation of Appendix C, subsection 12b, of the Architectural Design Guidelines. The offending element, Pennisetum setesium, commonly known as purple fountain grass, planted near our front walkway by the previous homeowners. This species, the notice sternly elaborated, was classified as non-native invasive and aesthetically discordant with the approved horticultural palette. Remediation, consisting of complete removal and replacement with a species from the attached pre-approved list, featuring such thrilling options as Liriope and Hostis, was mandated within 14 calendar days. Daily fines, commencing on day 15, would be assessed according to the HOA's published schedule of enforcement penalties. The notice concluded with the signature of Patricia Carmichael, rendered in a sharp, decisive script, followed by her title, President, Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association. My first personal audience with President Carmichael occurred the following Saturday. I was engaged in a sweaty, frustrating battle with the surprisingly deep root system of the offending fountain grass when a large, gleaming black Lincoln Navigator, the kind favored by dignitaries and security details, ironically, pulled to a silent, precise stop directly parallel to my curb. Patricia Carmichael emerged, looking effortlessly chic in crisp white walking shorts, a salmon-pink polo shirt, and expensive leather driving moccasins. Her blonde hair was arranged in a flawless, wind-resistant bob. Sunglasses perched atop her head like a minimalist tiara. She observed my struggles for a moment, head tilted slightly, an expression of faint pity mixed with impatience on her face. "Mr. Torres, good morning," she called out, her voice pleasant but carrying an unmistakable note of command. "Patricia Carmichael, I trust you're addressing the horticultural compliance issue noted earlier this week." "Good morning, Ms. Carmichael," I replied, straightening up and wiping a bead of sweat from my forehead with the back of my gloved hand. "Alex Torres. Yes, working on it now. This stuff is tougher than it looks." "Indeed," she acknowledged, though her tone implied the task was fundamentally simple, likely complicated only by inadequate technique or tools. "Proper leverage and root severing are key." "Of course," she added brightly. "Our approved landscape contractor, Topiary Titans, offers excellent invasive species removal services if you find yourself overly challenged." Her gaze then swept across our property, a rapid, appraising inventory. It paused, almost imperceptibly, on the small yard sign I had planted near the porch the previous evening. A standard campaign sign supporting the re-election of State Senator Richard Miller, who represented our district. Her smile tightened fractionally. "Mr. Torres," she began, her voice losing some of its manufactured warmth. "While Willow Creek Estates respects the principles of civic engagement, I feel obliged to remind you of the association's specific guidelines regarding political signage, as detailed in Guideline 19, Section A." She recited from memory. Strictly one sign per candidate per property. Maximum dimensions of 18 inches by 24 inches. And, critically, display is permitted only during the official 30-day period immediately preceding the election date. She gestured vaguely towards my sign. "While your sign conforms to the size limitations, a quick cross-reference with the official county election calendar this morning indicates that the 30-day window does not technically commence until Tuesday next. Therefore, your sign is currently," she paused, searching for the precise term, "temporally non-compliant. I trust you will rectify this minor discrepancy by removing the sign today and redisplaying it on Tuesday." "Actually, Ms. Carmichael," I replied, keeping my tone level, "I checked the State Board of Elections website yesterday. Their official guidance states the window for general election signage begins 45 days prior, which we are now within." Patricia Carmichael produced a small, dismissive laugh. "Mr. Torres, with all due respect to the state's bureaucratic interpretations, the governing authority for signage display within the boundaries of Willow Creek Estates is the HOA's published guidelines, which are based on the official notifications we receive directly from the county registrar. Our timeline is precise and non-negotiable." Her expression hardened slightly. "We work diligently here to maintain not just aesthetic harmony, but also a certain political neutrality in our shared visual landscape. Consistent application of the rules prevents unnecessary friction or the appearance of favoritism." She glanced again at the Miller sign, a flicker of something resembling distaste crossing her features. "Frankly, some elected officials seem less appreciative than others of the efforts required to maintain the exceptional quality of life communities like ours provide." Before I could formulate a response that was both polite and pointed, she offered another curt nod. "Do have a productive weekend with the Pennisetum, and please attend to the signage issue promptly." She turned, slid back into the Navigator's plush leather interior, and the vehicle glided away down Azalea Court, leaving me feeling vaguely like a recalcitrant schoolboy who had failed both horticulture and civics. "Wow," Isabella murmured, appearing beside me with 2 glasses of iced tea. "She didn't just suggest, she instructed you to take down Miller's sign based on her own calendar?" "Apparently. The HOA operates under its own sovereign temporal jurisdiction," I sighed, accepting the tea. "Welcome to Willow Creek Estates, where the CC and RS apparently supersede state election law. Patricia Carmichael, we soon discovered through neighborhood chatter and observation, was far more than just a stickler for rules. She was the undisputed matriarch, the chancellor of curb appeal, the commander-in-chief of compliance. HOA meetings were meticulously orchestrated performances starring herself. She controlled the agenda, dominated discussions, and wielded parliamentary procedure like a weapon to silence dissent or fast-track her own initiatives. Her pronouncements on property values, architectural integrity, and the importance of vigilance against external elements seeking to diminish Willow Creek's unique character were delivered with unwavering conviction. She cultivated an image of herself as not just an administrator, but as a vital political force, constantly mentioning her productive dialogues with county supervisors or her frank exchanges with state delegates, always positioning herself as the indispensable defender of Willow Creek's privileged status quo. Her ambition clearly transcended the merely parochial. She saw the HOA presidency as a stepping stone, a platform from which to exert influence on the wider political landscape, especially where it intersected with her tightly controlled domain. The catalyst for Patricia Carmichael's transformation from merely overbearing HOA president to potentially dangerous political operator arrived in the form of Virginia Senate Bill 724. On the surface, SB 724 was a relatively innocuous piece of legislation. Championed by our own state senator, Richard Miller, a moderate Republican generally known for his business-friendly but pragmatic approach, the bill aimed to standardize and improve HOA governance across the Commonwealth. Key provisions included mandating clearer, more accessible financial reporting, requiring HOAs to provide detailed annual budgets and expenditure reports to all homeowners upon request, establishing standardized, easily navigable procedures for homeowners to access HOA records, meeting minutes, and governing documents, placing reasonable caps on the fines HOAs could levy for specific categories of violations, particularly those related to landscaping, exterior paint colors, and other aesthetic issues often subject to subjective enforcement, creating a state-level ombudsman office to mediate disputes between homeowners and HOAs, offering a less costly alternative to litigation. Supporters, including numerous homeowner advocacy groups and Senator Miller himself, framed SB 724 as a necessary modernization, bringing much-needed transparency and fairness to HOA operations while preserving their core functions. They argued it protected homeowners from potential abuses of power, arbitrary fining, and opaque financial management. To Patricia Carmichael, however, SB 724 was nothing short of a declaration of war. She viewed it as a direct, politically motivated attack on the sanctity of private property rights, an assault on the autonomy of homeowners associations, and a catastrophic threat to the exclusive character and robust property values of Willow Creek Estates. The financial transparency requirements, she argued vehemently, would burden volunteer boards with excessive red tape and expose sensitive vendor contracts to public scrutiny, undermining her negotiating power. The limits on fining power, she claimed, would strip HOAs of their primary enforcement tool, leading inevitably to rampant noncompliance, aesthetic degradation, and the erosion of community standards. The Ombudsman Office, she predicted darkly, would become a playground for frivolous complaints by disgruntled residents, paralyzing HOA operations. Her reaction was immediate and ferocious. An emergency action alert email blasted out to all residents, painting SB 724 in apocalyptic terms. This radical bill, she wrote, sponsored by our own Senator Miller in a shocking betrayal of his constituents, threatens to unravel the very fabric of communities like Willow Creek. It will empower negligence, reward noncompliance, and invite state bureaucracy into our private affairs. We must defeat this disastrous legislation. She organized information sessions in the clubhouse, which quickly devolved into strategy sessions for opposing the bill, distributed pre-written letters for residents to send to Senator Miller, and established a phone bank operation run by volunteers dialing from a list procured, likely through questionable means, from HOA records. Her rhetoric became increasingly personal and vitriolic, portraying Senator Miller not just as misguided, but as actively hostile to the interests of his suburban constituents, perhaps influenced by urban special interests or anti-homeowner radicals. Despite this onslaught, Senator Miller remained steadfast. He issued a public statement acknowledging the concerns, but reiterating his belief that SB 724 represented a fair compromise, offering necessary protections for homeowners while respecting the role of well-managed HOAs. He cited broad bipartisan support and endorsements from AARP and several real estate associations. He politely declined Patricia's demands for a personal meeting to discuss her serious reservations, instead directing her to submit comments through the official legislative process. Being ignored, being dismissed by the very politician whose district encompassed her carefully curated domain, seemed to enrage Patricia beyond measure. Her frustration curdled into something colder, more calculating. At the next HOA board meeting, which I attended out of a morbid sense of curiosity and growing professional unease, her demeanor shifted from frantic opposition to a kind of icy resolve. Senator Miller continues to demonstrate a profound lack of understanding, a willful disregard for the concerns of the very people who elected him, she stated, her voice dangerously quiet. He believes he can ignore us, dismiss us. He operates under the illusion of political insulation. She paused, her eyes scanning the faces of her board members. Perhaps, she continued, a thin, knowing smile playing on her lips. The senator has vulnerabilities he assumes are well hidden. Perhaps there are aspects of his career or his personal life that wouldn't withstand public scrutiny. Sometimes, a politician needs a compelling reason, a powerful incentive, to reconsider their position and prioritize the well-being of their true constituents. The implication hung heavy in the air, unmistakable and chilling. The language of lobbying had been replaced by the language of threat. The weeks following that ominous board meeting saw a subtle shift in Patricia Carmichael's activities. While maintaining her public crusade against SB 724 through emails and newsletters, her focus seemed to turn inward, towards more clandestine efforts. She spent hours huddled in hushed conversations with Gary Jenkins, the tech-savvy HOA board member who seemed to function as her loyal vizier. Jenkins, a quiet man who ran a small IT consulting business from his home, possessed skills that could potentially extend beyond managing the HOA website. Simultaneously, whispers and rumors intensified within Willow Creek. Fleeting comments overheard at the pool, speculative posts on anonymous neighborhood forums. Pat's digging up dirt on Miller. Heard she hired a PI. Found something juicy. Someone saw Jenkins doing weird stuff with cameras near Miller's district office. It was impossible to separate fact from fiction, but the sheer volume of chatter suggested something was afoot. Knowing Patricia's relentless drive and her apparent belief that the ends justified the means when protecting her perceived domain, I couldn't discount the possibility that she was actively seeking or manufacturing compromising information. The break came not through neighborhood gossip, but through official channels, confirming my worst fears. My contact at the state police reached out again, this time with alarming urgency. Senator Miller's chief of staff had reported a direct, explicit blackmail attempt. An email, sent from a Proton Mail address, a service known for its end-to-end encryption and anonymity, had arrived in Senator Miller's official legislative inbox. The sender identified themselves only as a Willow Creek watchdog. The email's content was chillingly direct. It referenced SB 724, accused the senator of betraying his constituents, and then delivered the payload. Attached were 3 grainy but recognizable photographs. They appeared to show Senator Miller engaged in a seemingly furtive late-night meeting in a dimly lit parking garage with Natalia Petrova, a notoriously aggressive lobbyist representing large-scale developers. Interests often seen as conflicting with Miller's stated positions on controlled growth and environmental protection. The email text was unambiguous. Senator Miller, your hypocrisy is astounding. While you publicly champion smart growth, you privately cut deals with the very developers seeking to pave over our communities. These photos are just the beginning. We possess further, more damaging evidence of your questionable associations and financial dealings. Unless you publicly announce your withdrawal of support for SB 724 and ensure its permanent defeat in committee by the close of the current legislative session, this initial evidence, along with the full dossier, will be anonymously distributed to every major media outlet in Virginia, relevant ethics committees, and your political opponents. Your career will not survive the fallout. Choose wisely. Senator Miller immediately recognized the photos as potentially damaging, though he asserted to his staff and subsequently to investigators that the context was entirely misrepresented. He recalled a brief, unplanned encounter with Petrova months earlier after a late-night legislative session, where she had cornered him in the garage to lobby aggressively against a different zoning bill, an encounter he had cut short. He suspected the photos were either opportunistically snapped by someone lurking in the garage or, more worryingly, entirely fabricated. The threat, however, was explicit and serious: withdraw the bill or face public ruin. The state police, recognizing the gravity of attempting to coerce a legislator through extortion, immediately escalated the matter, looping in the FBI due to the use of interstate email systems and the potential violation of federal extortion statutes. And because the threat implicitly targeted the legislative process and a public official, the case information was cross-referenced through the national threat tracking systems, inevitably landing within the operational purview of the U.S. Capitol Police Threat Assessment Section. Even though I was personally recused, the specter of Patricia Carmichael's desperate power play had now officially breached the walls separating my quiet suburban life from the high-stakes threats I managed daily. The game had escalated far beyond HOA bylaws. It had become a federal case with serious implications. The moment the Senator Miller blackmail investigation formally activated within the multi-agency framework, my role shifted entirely. While I remained chief of IRSCI, from the previous story context, let's correct this to my established role as USCP lead investigator for this story, my direct knowledge of the potential perpetrator, Patricia Carmichael, and the location, my own neighborhood, necessitated strict adherence to recusal protocols within USCP regarding this specific case. Even as I continued my broader duties, Deputy Director Evans, my immediate superior at USCP, formally assigned lead investigator Marcus Cole from a different USCP division, Protective Services Detail Intelligence Liaison, to handle USCP's role in the Joint Task Force, ensuring an objective perspective. My input was limited to providing general context on typical threat vectors against legislators or potential security concerns, carefully avoiding any mention of my personal observations regarding Carmichael. The joint investigation, spearheaded by FBI Special Agent Anya Sharma, kicked into high gear, operating under the assumption that the threat was credible and potentially escalating. The priorities were clear: identify the source, trace the encrypted email, and determine the identity of a Willow Creek watchdog. Verify the evidence, forensically analyze the photographs, and assess the credibility of the claim regarding a full dossier. Was it real, fabricated, or exaggerated? Neutralize the threat, prevent the dissemination of the damaging material, real or fake, and apprehend the individuals responsible for the blackmail attempt. Assess broader implications. Determine if this was an isolated act or part of a larger pattern of attempts to coerce officials. The FBI cyber team immediately went to work on the Proton Mail trace. While notoriously difficult due to encryption and jurisdictional hurdles, they began analyzing metadata, cross-referencing potential originating IP addresses, likely masked by VPNs or Tor, against known malicious actors or previous threat communications. Simultaneously, FBI forensic imaging specialists subjected the photographs to intense scrutiny. Using advanced software, they analyzed pixel density, lighting consistency, comparing shadows within the image, EXIF data, often stripped, but sometimes recoverable fragments remain, and conducted reverse image searches. Their initial findings were highly suggestive of manipulation. Shadows seemed inconsistent between Senator Miller and Ms. Petrova, suggesting compositing. Pixelation patterns around the edges of the figures hinted at digital alteration, and crucially, analysis of the background elements, specific light fixtures, wall textures in the parking garage, didn't perfectly match known photos of the garages typically used by legislators near the state capitol building after hours. It looked increasingly like a fabrication, albeit a reasonably sophisticated one. Agent Sharma's team began building a profile of potential subjects within Willow Creek estates known to vehemently oppose SB 724 and Senator Miller. Patricia Carmichael's name surfaced immediately, based on Senator Miller's own reports of her aggressive lobbying and veiled threats. Investigators started discreet background checks on Patricia and her known close associates, particularly Gary Jenkins, whose IT background made him a person of interest for the technical aspects of the email and photo manipulation. Subpoenas were issued for Patricia's and Gary's phone records, call logs, and cell tower location data, seeking any communication patterns that might correlate with the timing of the blackmail email or suggest coordination. Financial records were also discreetly obtained, looking for unusual expenditures that might indicate hiring a private investigator or purchasing specialized software or hardware, like the burner laptop. Investigators also conducted carefully planned, low-key interviews with selected Willow Creek residents identified as potential witnesses, individuals who had attended the volatile HOA meetings or who might have had relevant interactions with Patricia or Gary. These interviews were framed broadly, initially focusing on community tensions surrounding SB 724, gradually probing for any specific statements or observations related to threats against Senator Miller, all while protecting the sensitive nature of the ongoing federal investigation. Several residents confirmed Patricia's increasingly hostile rhetoric and her boasts about having ways to make the senator listen. One neighbor recalled seeing Gary Jenkins acting suspiciously near Senator Miller's district office weeks earlier, though they hadn't thought much of it at the time. Slowly, painstakingly, the pieces of the puzzle began to align. The cyber trace, while not yet definitively pinpointing the source computer, identified patterns consistent with the use of specific anonymizing services previously linked to Gary Jenkins' known online activities. The forensic analysis solidified the conclusion that the photos were digitally fabricated. Witness statements established Patricia's motive, intent, and increasingly threatening language. Financial records revealed Gary Jenkins had purchased a high-end graphics software suite shortly before the email was sent. The circumstantial evidence was becoming overwhelming, pointing directly at a conspiracy between Patricia Carmichael and Gary Jenkins to fabricate evidence and blackmail a sitting state senator. All they needed now was the final, concrete link, proof of Patricia's direct involvement in sending the threat or acknowledging the scheme. The investigative team, led by Agent Sharma, decided the best way to secure the final, irrefutable piece of evidence was through a controlled operation, a carefully orchestrated sting designed to elicit an admission or incriminating action from Patricia Carmichael herself. The upcoming Willow Creek Estate's annual summer social, an event Patricia meticulously planned and presided over each year, presented the perfect venue. It was her domain, a place where she felt powerful, in control, and perhaps, investigators reasoned, more likely to let her guard down or act on her perceived victory if she believed her blackmail attempt was succeeding. The plan was intricate, requiring seamless coordination between the FBI, state police, providing backup and local knowledge, and Senator Miller's office. The core involved a carefully crafted response to the blackmailer's email, sent from Senator Miller's official account to the anonymous Proton mail address. The email conveyed reluctant compliance. It stated that the senator, after careful consideration of the sensitive materials and potential political ramifications, was prepared to withdraw support for SB 724. However, it continued, he required absolute, verifiable assurance that all copies of the photos and any other alleged dossier materials would be irrevocably destroyed. To confirm this discreetly, the email proposed that the sender provide a simple, nonverbal confirmation signal to a designated legislative aide who would be casually attending the Willow Creek Summer Social the following Saturday. The signal, the aide would ask, is the legislative forecast clearing up? And the blackmailer, or their proxy, should respond with a specific, predetermined innocuous phrase like, yes, it looks like smoother sailing ahead. This controlled communication was designed to achieve several goals. Confirm the sender was monitoring the anonymous email account. Link the sender's actions directly to the legislative outcome of SB 724 and potentially capture an incriminating admission or acknowledgement from Patricia or Gary Jenkins. An experienced undercover FBI agent, skilled in elicitation techniques, was selected to play the role of the legislative aide. Extensive surveillance measures were planned for the summer social. Plainclothes FBI agents and state police officers integrated into the crowd posing as guests or event staff. Tactical teams staged discreetly nearby, mobile surveillance vans monitoring communications, and microcameras providing visual coverage of key areas, particularly wherever Patricia Carmichael was expected to hold court. As a resident, my attendance with Isabella and the kids was expected and natural. Internally, however, I felt a profound sense of dissonance. Participating in a neighborhood barbecue while simultaneously aware that a multi-agency federal sting operation was unfolding around me, targeting my own HOA president, was surreal. My role was simply to observe, blend in, and maintain my cover, but the professional investigator within me couldn't help but analyze the setup, note the positioning of the undercover agents I subtly recognized, and feel the underlying tension beneath the cheerful facade of suburban conviviality. The summer social began under a perfect blue sky. Families spread blankets on the expansive lawn behind the clubhouse. Kids shrieked in the bouncy house. The air filled with the sizzle of burgers on the grill and the upbeat tempo of a local cover band. Patricia Carmichael was in her element, gliding through the crowd like royalty, accepting compliments on the food. I insisted on organic, locally sourced beef, of course, making pronouncements about upcoming HOA initiatives, and occasionally casting sharp, appraising glances towards Senator Miller, who arrived as planned for a brief, politically necessary glad-handing appearance, maintaining a carefully neutral expression. Gary Jenkins shadowed Patricia, looking pale and sweating slightly despite the pleasant weather, his eyes constantly darting around the crowd, fiddling nervously with his phone. Around 3 p.m., the undercover agent playing the legislative aide initiated the controlled communication. Approaching Gary Jenkins near the drinks table, the agent made casual conversation before subtly asking the trigger question. Big crowd today. Busy legislative session too. Any sense if the legislative forecast is clearing up at all? Jenkins, visibly startled, looking flustered. He muttered something unintelligible and quickly moved towards Patricia, who was holding court by the raffle prize display. The undercover agent observed Jenkins whispering urgently in Patricia's ear, showing her something on his phone, likely a notification related to the senator's email. Patricia listened intently, her expression hardening for a moment before smoothing into a mask of smug satisfaction. She nodded sharply at Jenkins, then deliberately scanned the crowd until her eyes met the undercover agents across the lawn. With calculated casualness, Patricia detached herself from her group and strolled towards the agent. "Excuse me," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "I overheard your meteorological inquiry earlier." She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice but ensuring it was audible, directly facing the agent's concealed recording device. "You can inform the senator," she murmured, a triumphant glint in her eyes. "That yes, indeed. It looks like much smoother sailing ahead. Unexpectedly clear skies, in fact." She gave a small, knowing smirk. "Tell him his prudence is appreciated. There will be no further storms." It was perfect. A direct acknowledgement of the coded question, an implicit confirmation of the blackmail scheme's success, smoother sailing ahead, once the bill was withdrawn, and a clear link to her intent, all captured on high-fidelity audio and video. It was the final nail in the coffin. The undercover agent gave a subtle, prearranged signal. Within seconds, Agent Sharma and 3 other FBI agents materialized, converging on Patricia from different angles. Simultaneously, another team intercepted Gary Jenkins as he tried to edge away towards the parking lot. Local police officers discreetly formed a perimeter around the immediate area. "Patricia Carmichael?" Agent Sharma stated clearly, her voice cutting through the sudden hush that fell over the nearby crowd as people sensed something extraordinary was happening. "FBI, you are under arrest." The scene on the manicured lawn of the Willow Creek Estates clubhouse devolved from cheerful summer social to stunned, open-mouthed spectacle in the span of about 10 seconds. Patricia Carmichael, who moments before had been basking in the glow of her perceived power and successful coercion, stood frozen, a half-eaten artisanal cupcake suspended in her hand, surrounded by federal agents displaying gleaming badges. Gary Jenkins, intercepted near the bouncy house, looked like he might faint. Patricia's initial reaction was sheer, uncomprehending denial. "Arrest me." Her voice rose, shrill and incredulous, attracting the attention of everyone within earshot. This is outrageous. A mistake. Who are you people? What is this about? Is this Miller's doing? Is he retaliating because I dared to represent my constituents? Ma'am, Agent Sharma repeated firmly. Her voice brooks no argument. We are special agents with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. This is not a mistake. You are being arrested pursuant to a federal warrant based on a grand jury indictment. She gestured towards another agent who began reading the formal charges aloud. Violations of Title 18, United States Code, Section 875. Interstate communications containing threats, Title 18, United States Code, Section 872. Extortion by officer or employee of the United States, and conspiracy. The specific, serious language, federal statutes, extortion, conspiracy, seemed to finally penetrate Patricia's bubble of self-importance. The color drained visibly from her face. Her eyes darted wildly, seeking escape or perhaps an ally in the stunned crowd of her neighbors, but finding only shocked or bewildered faces. The foundation of her authority, built on intimidation and the meticulous enforcement of petty rules, crumbled instantly under the weight of federal law enforcement. No, this is just vigorous political discourse, she stammered, the words sounding hollow even to her own ears. I was exercising my First Amendment rights, advocating for my community. Advocacy does not involve fabricating evidence or issuing threats to coerce legislative action, Ms. Carmichael, Sharma stated calmly. That constitutes extortion under federal law. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. As the Miranda warning was recited, the full tableau unfolded for the assembled residents of Willow Creek Estates. Their HOA president, the woman who lectured them about the precise shade of beige permitted for deck stain, was being handcuffed by FBI agents. The carefully constructed image of respectable community leadership imploded in a public spectacle of flashing badges and stunned silence, punctuated only by the distant, oblivious shrieks of children still playing in the bouncy house. Cell phone cameras emerged, capturing the scene, ensuring Patricia Carmichael's downfall would be documented and disseminated throughout the community and likely beyond. While Patricia was being escorted, trembling but still attempting to project indignation, towards an unmarked federal vehicle, other agents were executing federal search warrants at her residence and Gary Jenkins' home. Teams moved quickly, seizing computers, laptops, including the burner used for the email, found hidden under Jenkins' floorboards, printers, external hard drives, smartphones, and any documents related to SB 724, Senator Miller, or the HOA's political activities. Subsequent forensic analysis of these devices yielded a treasure trove of corroborating evidence. Draft versions of the threatening email, the original, unaltered photograph files used for the fabrication, internet search histories related to blackmail and encrypted communication, deleted chats between Patricia and Gary discussing the plan's details and potential risks, and even notes outlining Patricia's escalating anger towards Senator Miller and her determination to make him pay for defying her. The arrest at the summer social, while disruptive, served its purpose perfectly. It neutralized the immediate threat, captured crucial incriminating statements, and allowed for the simultaneous seizure of evidence before it could be destroyed. It also sent an unmistakable message, broadcast live via dozens of cell phone cameras, about the serious consequences of attempting to corrupt the political process through illegal means. The fallout within Willow Creek Estates was immediate and tumultuous. The arrest of their HOA president on federal extortion charges plunged the community into chaos and recrimination. The remaining HOA board members, tainted by association or simply unwilling to manage the crisis, resigned en masse within days. An emergency community meeting, marked by anger, confusion, and a palpable sense of betrayal, resulted in the formation of an interim resident committee tasked with the daunting challenge of restoring basic HOA functions, initiating a thorough review of the association's finances and practices under Patricia's reign, and organizing elections for entirely new leadership. The legal proceedings against Patricia Carmichael and Gary Jenkins moved forward within the federal court system. Gary Jenkins, facing serious charges but clearly the subordinate partner, quickly agreed to cooperate fully with prosecutors in exchange for leniency. His detailed testimony corroborated the entire scheme, from Patricia's initial rage over SB 724 to her directive to find something on Senator Miller, to his own role in fabricating the photos and sending the threatening email under her explicit instructions. Patricia Carmichael, facing Gary's testimony, the recorded admission from the sting operation, the damning digital forensic evidence, and the prospect of a lengthy, reputation-shattering trial, ultimately saw no viable path forward. After initially maintaining a defiant stance, the reality of the federal charges and the potential for a severe prison sentence led her to accept a plea agreement. She pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit extortion. At her sentencing hearing, the federal courtroom was filled with a delegation of Willow Creek residents, Senator Miller's chief of staff, and representatives from good government groups. The assistant U.S. attorney argued forcefully for a significant sentence, emphasizing the profound societal harm caused by attempts to intimidate elected officials and undermine the legislative process through criminal means. Patricia's defense attorney pleaded for leniency, citing her previous lack of criminal record and her overzealous but misguided commitment to her community. The judge, however, was unpersuaded by the latter argument. "Ms. Carmichael," the judge stated sternly, "your actions were not misguided advocacy. They were a calculated criminal conspiracy designed to subvert the democratic process through fear and fabrication. This court must send a clear message that such conduct will be met with severe consequences." Patricia Carmichael was sentenced to 36 months, 3 years, in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. Gary Jenkins received 5 years of probation for his cooperation. Senator Miller, publicly vindicated, issued a statement thanking law enforcement for their swift action and reaffirming his commitment to governing without fear or favor. SB 724, the HOA transparency bill that had inadvertently triggered the entire saga, proceeded through the legislature and was signed into law, celebrated by homeowner advocates across Virginia. Back in Willow Creek Estates, the process of rebuilding trust and reforming the HOA began in earnest. The interim committee oversaw a forensic audit, which uncovered not only poor record-keeping but also evidence suggesting potential minor financial irregularities under Patricia's tenure, though nothing rising to the level of the federal charges. New elections brought in a board composed of residents explicitly committed to transparency, collaboration, and adherence to both the spirit and the letter of the law, including the newly enacted SB 724. HOA meetings became less formal, more conversational, focused on genuine community issues rather than power plays. For my family and me, the resolution brought a complex wave of emotions. There was relief, undoubtedly, that the immediate threat was neutralized and that the toxic atmosphere Patricia had fostered was beginning to dissipate. There was professional satisfaction in knowing that the systems designed to protect public officials and the legislative process, systems I worked within daily, had functioned effectively, even when the threat emerged from an unexpected, intimate quarter. But there was also a lingering sadness, a sense of disillusionment. Our quest for a quiet, boring sanctuary had led us directly into the path of a federal extortion plot. The experience was a stark, unwelcome reminder that the fault lines of ambition, corruption, and criminality run everywhere, respecting no zip code, no manicured lawn, no illusion of suburban peace. Life on Azalea Court eventually settled into the comfortable rhythm we had sought. Sophia's soccer team won their division. Mateo aced his science fair project. We hosted barbecues where the only controversy was the choice of marinade. Yet, the memory of Patricia Carmichael's downfall, the flashing FBI badges against the backdrop of laughing children and sizzling burgers, served as a permanent, sobering footnote to our pursuit of normalcy. The air in Willow Creek felt cleaner, the community bonds slowly mending, but the quiet now seemed less like innocence and more like hard-won, vigilant peace. And perhaps, I reflected, in a world as complex and fraught as ours, that was the most realistic, most valuable kind of quiet one could hope for.